Thank you so much for joining, everybody. We were was just thinking about you. Oh, thanks, Tamara. Thank you for that. Yeah, I thought it was probably time to do a hi, Rose. Good to see you. Thanks for joining. Hi, Jennifer. Good to see. Hi, Jim. Good to see you again, Jim. Thank you for joining again. So yeah, it's very good to see everybody. I was possibly going to be talking to a fellow Substacker today, but I'm not sure if that's happening or not. So her name's Ashley. Her account's the Lucid Hex. But I'm not sure if she's going to be joining me today or not. But we'll see as the show goes along. But thanks everyone for joining me. I thought I would start with a recent tweet. I was going to talk about something else. Hi, Pamela. Good to see you. I was going to talk about something else, but then a couple of hours ago, I started seeing this tweet going around or this message going around, and it was from CBS News. And the message going around, first nibbles. Yes. Okay. There's nibbles. Are you happy now, Tamara? Has everyone just look, she's actually looking, her ears are now popped up. Nibbles, nibbles. See? There you go. Yeah. Oh, thanks. That's all right. I have a feeling that there are some people on my Substack live who are only here for nibbles. I have a feeling that I have competition here. But yeah, and she doesn't even do much. She just like lays there the whole time, occasionally pops her head up. Hey, Joe and Nibs. Yeah, yeah. Hi, Nibbles. Yeah, there she is. She'll be there the whole time. I might just move over here a little bit because it's just a little. Oh, no, just a priority. Okay, good. Oh, look, I'll just include her head into the shot because I know it's very important for you guys. Love for Nibs. Hi, Trish. Good to see you. Yeah, all the love hearts. See, now I realise that all the love hearts were for Nibbles, not me, which is hurtful. Which is a little bit hurtful. But anyway, so I this morning, I saw this tweet from CBS. That's for Nibbles, all those little love hearts, and the it, hi Dave from California. Good to see you again. There's Nibbles, Dave. There you go. There you go. There you go. That's Nibbles there. And that's your Nibbles for the day. And so, yeah. And so Nibbles is basically a care dog. She's like a support dog for all of us as we go through this Trump administration. She's the global support dog for everyone. I have 4 dogs. I pet accordingly. Yeah. Oh, that's good, Trish. Yeah. Yeah. Hi, Joe. Yeah. Hi, Dave. Good to see you. There you go. I'll bring Nibbles back into the picture at a certain stage. I'll just leave her head just slightly there, so you know you're aware of everything she's doing. And so yeah, I saw this tweet, it was like a CBS tweet, and our international mascot. Yeah, she's the international mascot, the international care dog. The only thing about Nibbles is that, and I've said this before, is she is big, she is strong on borders. Yeah, she does like strong borders. So that's the only thing that she has in common with Trump. Yeah. So I was watching, so I read this tweet. Hi, Carol, good to see you. So I read this tweet, and basically the tweet was from CBS, and we all know that that's CBS. Hi, me, good to see you. Good to see you again, Sandra. And so I saw this tweet. I've got to show it one more time for Nibbles. There's Nibbles there, Sandra. There you go, Sandra. You can see Nibbles there. She's there. There you go. That'll bring down your blood pressure. Yep, that brings down your blood pressure by a little bit. There you go. She still hasn't moved. She's still in the same position. Yeah. Hi, Kimmy. Good to see you. Yeah, and basically, yes. So CBS sends this post out, and everybody just retweets this post. And the post is basically saying, so it gets retweeted by JD Vance, Ted Cruz, hi Kimmy, and all these people on the right, and it basically says that CBS has spoken to 2 Trump officials, and they basically said the Trump officials, hi Carol, the Trump officials have basically said, yeah, that the police officer had internal bleeding, right? She's in direct contrast to your T-shirt. Oh, really? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, not yeah, exactly. Rage, rage, and calmness. Yeah. So yin and yang. I just wanted to give a little bit of yin and yang to you people. Well, I'll just let you know this shirt, rage, is actually based on an Australian TV show it's been around since the 70s, and it was a music show. And the music it would show music clips all night. So it would start about 11 o'clock at night and it would finish about 7 in the morning, and it was just music clip after music clip after music clip for the whole night. It was called Rage. That was so it's basically, yeah, based on that. It was a bit of like a cult TV show. And, people would come home after they'd been out clubbing all night, and they come home and they just stick on Rage. It'd be like music all night. Yeah, it was before the internet, so that's what this is. It's referring to the TV show Rage. I don't believe that there's been talk about how it couldn't be true. Yeah, exactly. And look, the thing about this CBS thing and is that all it basically said. Now, obviously, CBS is now owned by Barry Weiss. Barry Weiss is Australian MTV. Yeah, except it's Australian MTV. Except it's a little bit like MTV. Yeah, I would say a little bit. Yeah, yeah. But a little bit more alternative. It wasn't like a mainstream show. It was on like a public broadcaster, like PBS. So it was like a niche sort of group that sort of watched it. A little bit alternative. Yeah, it wasn't sort of like a mainstream thing. Um, so what was I saying? Yeah. So basically, yeah. So CBS, which is basically now owned by Barry Weiss. Would you ever do an interview with Nibbles? Good question. Good question. Um, let's see how that would go. Nibbles, Nibbles. How old are you? How old are you, Nibbles? Nibbles, how old are you? Yeah, I don't think it's going to work. I don't think it's going to be successful. Generally, in an interview, you do want the person you're interviewing to be able to have a conversation with you. And as you can see, Nibbles is very hard to interview. She's very cute, but she's very hard to interview. Nibbles, Nibbles, what breed are you? Yeah. So yeah. So thanks, Kimmy, but I don't think she's going to be. Oh, hi, Melissa. Good to see you. We were just someone just asked me to interview Nibbles, my dog, and I don't think that's going to be. My big lab sends Nibs loves. Oh, that's nice. Yeah. I would say I would say that my dog would send love back, but the truth of the matter is my dog would probably growl at your dog because she has Chihuahua in her, and it's not her fault that she has Chihuahua in her, but she can be quite aggressive. She can be aggressive. She's only small, so yeah. Barry Rice doesn't own CBS. The Ellisons do. She just runs it probably in the ground because no one. Yeah, exactly. And look. I think there's definitely been a big change in CBS since Barry Weiss took over, and is now, obviously they got rid of Colbert, who also works at CBS, right? So I think they're trying to make changes. Barry Weiss is also more favourable towards Trump. Now, I wouldn't say Barry Weiss is like I wouldn't put her in the same category. She has tiny dog syndrome. She does, Trish. She does. And she also feels a little bit sensitive about that, being saying that she has tiny dog syndrome. It's something she doesn't like people saying about her. So just keep that in mind that she has, yeah, she finds it offensive. I don't, but she does find it a little bit offensive. Yeah. Viewers dropped already something like 23%. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Because I think I think the issue I think the issue is for Barry Weiss is I don't think she is, to be fair, I don't think she's like Laura Ingraham. or Sean Hannity. I don't think she's at that level, but she's definitely one of those people who, um, yeah, one of those people who basically call herself like a centrist. She used to work at the New York Times, Barry Weiss did. She was never a straight news journalist. She was always an opinion journalist. So when she worked at the New York Times, she was an opinion journalist. And her big thing at the New York Times was that, that she thought the New York Times was too censorious and that they were too woke and that they didn't call out enough about trans people in sport, all that sort of stuff. What happens to investigative reporting? Exactly. Yeah. So then she started Free Press, internal bleeding likely caused by falling down drunk celebrity, his GoFundMe, windfall. Rumor has it that the number is approaching $500,000. Pretty good payout for squeezing a trigger. Yeah, exactly, Jim. And the lying. So I'll go back to the CBS report. So we know that CBS is a little bit compromised, but we also know that CBS, the 60 Minutes story that was going to talk about the immigrants that were going to El Salvador prison has been killed. Now, it's important to say that CBS and both Barry Weiss have both said that story, the 60 Minutes story, hasn't been killed. It's just been postponed. But I haven't heard any more about it um, um, coming back again in a different format. And again, the reason why they said they paused that story was because they couldn't get a report from the Trump administration. But the fact of the matter is that the journalist and the producers had actually asked the Trump administration to make a statement on this, and they rejected it. So it wasn't that they weren't asked; it's that the Trump administration rejected that information. So again, that doesn't even make any sense, right? It's one thing. Now, I would actually, to be honest with you, I would agree that if the 60 Minutes reporters had not asked the Trump administration for their side of the story, I do think that would have been wrong on 60 Minutes, but that's not actually what happened. So you've got Stephen Colbert getting fired. You've got the 60 Minutes report getting killed. You've now got now sort of Barry Weiss, who's kind of like a Trump, Trump sympathetic, I would say, to that thing. And then CBS sends out a story, a tweet today, and that story gets if you actually read the tweet doesn't say, right. And this is the part where it's so frustrating. It is so frustrating to see this bit, right? Because it's not, to me, it's not the CBS thing. The tweet that I saw isn't actually that bad, right? I will say that the part that I read on the tweet, I'm just talking about the actual tweet itself that got shared by CBS, wasn't that bad because all the tweet said was they had spoken to a couple of Trump officials, and they had told them, right? They had told them that the officer had internal bleeding. Her asking the regime side was Barry trying to ask yes or no, airing the story. She got a no. Exactly right. Yeah, exactly. So so now you've got this tweet, which in itself I don't feel is that bad because it's not the CBS in that particular tweet is not saying that they have verified the information or that they have investigated the information to find out that the officer had received internal bleeding. That's not what the tweet says. The tweet says they had spoken to a couple of people from the Trump administration, and that's what they told them. Now, the Trump administration has taken that tweet, J.D. Vance, Ted Cruz, Donald Trump, all of MAGA media, right, are now reposting that tweet and saying, basically calling the left liars, that the left have been gaslighting them, and that this particular tweet now proves, right, now proves that they were right the whole time, that the officer was seriously hurt. Now, this is so maddening because if you have, the reason I find it so maddening is because if you had a proper media, right, or you had people who were critical, who had critical thinking skills, they could take what the Trump administration, basically what JD Vance did, and Ted Cruz and all these people, is they basically quote tweeted it. So you've got the CBS tweet underneath, and then you've got them responding to that tweet by saying, "This is proof that the the left have been lying." That's not what the CBS thing says. The CBS thing is just reporting what your administration is saying. It's not independently verifying any information. Nowhere in that CBS report is it saying, we spoke to doctors, we spoke to we spoke to people who we went to hospital with. None of that is in the CBS report, right? All it says is that's like CBS contacting Trump, Kristi Noem, and whoever's in administration and saying, "Oh, what's your information?" And they come back and they go, "Well, you know, um, well, we believe that he had internal bleeding," and they just go, "Okay, well, we report this." So you have to separate the two things, right? But the quote tweets by the Trump, a bunch of propaganda. Yeah, how is it possible? You're absolutely right, but MAGA won't deduce. Yeah, how is it possible that you can have a tweet underneath your tweet, right? And you're the vice president of the United States, Peter Summitt. There is no publicity released medical report. Sounds like limitation of Putin propaganda. Tell them lying often enough. Yeah, exactly, Peter. Because at the end of the day, Peter, if the bombshell report, it's the same as a bruise from shaking hands, more like, yeah, it would be a why would you quote, like, this is how ridiculous this is. This is almost comical. You have Trump officials quote tweeting a CBS report that says that their colleagues said that he was internal bleeding, not CBS, their colleagues, but they're reporting it as CBS has reported this. This is insane. Now, I would say where CBS is being a little bit tricky with it is that if I was CBS and I had this administration using their information in this type of form, I would then come out and say, well, just to clarify, CBS is not saying that we verify this report. All we're saying is this is what we were told by the Trump administration. And yeah, so it is maddening to see this, the gaslighting from the Trump administration. I would say one of the biggest people who gaslight the most is JD Vance. JD Vance takes gaslighting to a whole new record. Yeah, because it's incredible how much he just lies all the time. Now, everyone knows that Trump lies, but JD Vance certainly does lie a lot, right? And the fact that he's been one of the biggest pushers, he was one of the first people to come out and say that Renee Good was in the wrong. Trump is a demonstrated liar, just like Putin. The trait rubs off into his minute. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I kind of feel like you're right, Peter. I kind of feel like they all have to lie in front of, like, remember, I miss being able to, Melissa, I miss being able to generally believe our own government agencies. Exactly, Melissa. Yeah. Tamara, everything they say is projection. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And it's gotten to the point now where that a lot of they just lie so much and they gaslight the people so much that you end up with someone like the YouTuber called Nick Shirley. Nick Shirley came up, and I think the reason I'm bringing him up is because I think Nick Shirley is the natural progression of all these lies. Nick Shirley, who did that story about the daycare centers in Minnesota, and he said that there was fraud there. Now, Nick Shirley was retweeted, by JD Vance, by Donald Trump, by all these people, and he was retweeted like he was going to be the next Pulitzer Prize winner, right? Now, Nick Shirley is a 23-year-old YouTuber who recently got interviewed by another YouTuber who's more of a left-wing YouTuber, right? And this other YouTuber interviewed Nick Shirley, and he asked him a question. He said basically he was asking him about what what proof he had that the daycare centres were involved in fraud, the ones that he talked about. And he said, well, we'll see about that, but there has been fraud in Minnesota, and there has been fraud before. Now, this is where the craziness begins, right? Nobody, nobody was saying there was no fraud, but the way Nick Shirley and the way the Trump administration made it out is that the knowledge about the fraud in some parts of the Somali community only got exposed when Nick Shirley talked about it. Now, the reality is that Tim Walz and the Trump and the Biden administration had already been investigating fraud in that area. And they actually, I think they indicted about 90 people. There was lots of convictions. And this all happened going back to 2021. So the idea that we just found out about some fraud going on in that community, and also it's important to say it makes up about 1% of the community. So only 1% of the community was involved in this fraud. So then to make it out about the whole Somalian community is again just another lie. But the fact that Nick Shirley, right, I heard about it before Trump came back and so on. The fact that Nick Shirley is being talked about in MAGA circles as like a Pulitzer Prize journalist is just it just encapsulates I think the new media that a lot of people have to deal with, which is basically you can just lie. Because I think the difference is that media is now only the Trump, especially on the MAGA side, the MAGA media is not trying to do stories for all Americans, right? It's not trying to uncover stories for all Americans. MAGA media only wants to uncover stories that are going to make the Democrats look bad. So only for half the country, right? And that's not really media. If you have a media who only cares about the other side doing something bad, that's really bad for the country. Yeah, that's bad for everyone. And and to be fair, I wouldn't want I wouldn't want someone on the left doing the same thing, because the idea that only people on the left or only people on the right do bad things is obviously insane. You're going to have people who identify as Democrats who do bad things. You're going to have people who identify as Republicans who do bad things. And we need to have a media who doesn't think about whether they're Republicans or Democrats, but more about the issues. And I think this is the problem with opinion journalism now being the number one thing, where straight news journalism is now like the sideline. No one thinks about straight news journalism anymore. Like people, and I think this kind of happened with Fox News, right? Fox News in the 90s, with Rupert Murdoch, ex-Australian, like Rupert Murdoch, now an American citizen. So he's no longer part of my country. But so as much as I like to, as much as I like to say about Trump, I do have to take maybe a tiny bit. Australia does have to take a tiny bit of responsibility for Rupert Murdoch because he was born here. But I will say that that in the 90s, Roger Ailes and Rupert Murdoch just came up with an idea, and that idea was that people prefer partisan news, and people prefer news that is kind of opinion based, right? We no longer have a mainstream media that does that anymore. Yeah, exactly. And so Roger Ailes and Rupert Murdoch realized that people are more interested in some ways. It makes me think the original Fox News from the 90s, I kind of think is similar to how social media works, where the algorithm pushes conflicts. The algorithm will push conflict in social media. And Roger Ailes and Rupert Murdoch knew this in free to air in TV network before social media. They already knew this before social media did it, right? They were the first ones to realize that partisan conflict is the number one thing that sells, right? People would rather have two people yelling at each other. Even from the early 90s, they would always have these shows where you'd have a left-wing person on there and you'd have a right-wing person on there, and they would just argue with each other. And that was part of the show, right? Um, so, so I think Fox News has a lot to pay for it. Then I think what happened is that because they were doing so great in the ratings, they were doing amazing in the ratings, is that other news networks started looking at them and thinking, we should do the same thing. We should do a lot more opinion. You just look at shows like Jerry Springer, people were drawn to, yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly, Tamara. Yeah. It is like Jerry Springer, like that type of show. And then so what happened is CNN, they started doing a lot more opinion, right? And then other companies, opinion, MSNBC, opinion. Now, I don't have anything wrong with opinion. I think opinion is an important part of it. I do have something wrong with opinion being the number one news source, right? I think you should have straight news and then the opinion is underneath it as a complementary thing. Shock and awe for ratings that led to sensationalism and out. Yeah, exactly, Trish. Yeah. Now, I remember when you used to buy a newspaper, right? And you would buy the newspaper and the majority of the newspaper was straight news. This is what happened. This is what happened. Bang, bang, bang. And then there would be like 2 pages that would have opinion, right? That was it. There was 2 opinion pages and then you would read those. Now these days, news is like 98% opinion with 2% straight news. And I think this is a really big problem. And I think this is why someone like JD Vance, right, or someone like Donald Trump can or Ted Cruz or any of these people, they can retweet something from CBS, misconstrued what it says, right, and then add some spin to it, make it out like somehow the news used to be just the facts, and anchor could express their thoughts after they put. Yeah, exactly, Trish. Yeah, exactly right. Yeah. And a lot of people were absorbing also the same news. You would have maybe 6 or 7 news organizations. Everyone would come home. Everyone was sharing the same news. Now, everyone's sharing different parts of the news. And therefore, like, that's why someone like Nick Shirley or someone like, politicians can just boldface lie. Because when JD Vance boldface lies, he's not doing it and if you repeat it, if you retweet it enough people, yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly right. You can get away with great shirt. Oh, thank you. If you're Australian, you would know what this shirt is. It's this Australian was it was an old music shirt, a music TV shirt. Mind you, government funded social programs are easy to target for fraud. Remember the pink bat schemes? Yes, in Australia, yes. Vet education programs, NDIS. Need to provide a hollow lob. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, exactly right, Peter. I think Peter's an Aussie. But yeah, um, exactly right. And I just think that I would love to go back to a period where CBS was one of the longest standing news companies and a credibility. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I remember the one of the biggest stories that I remember in recent years, not that probably 10, 12 years ago, was the Boston Globe when they did that story on the Catholic Church and pedophiles. And so basically it was a massive story. They turned it into a movie, right? I can't remember the name of the movie now. Does anyone remember the name of the what was the movie called? It was it's right on the tip of my tongue. But anyway, it was about the Boston Globe doing investigative story. Spotlight was based on that. Yeah, exactly. Thanks, Melissa. Thank you. I had it right on the tip of my tongue. Yeah, I love that movie as well. And that movie and that series highlighted a news organization that spent 3 years investigating a story, right? Around the clock. They had lawyers, they had researchers, they had people checking sources. Because why? Because they were about to expose that the Catholic Church was moving pedophile priests, so priests, um, priests, yeah, you live in the Boston area, yeah, and priests. And by the way, the story that Spotlight and the Boston Globe, that happened in Australia as well. So the people in Australia here would know the same story. We had the same thing happen here. It happened in Europe and the UK. The Catholic Church was basically, what would happen is that the Catholic Church would have some people would complain about a local priest, and they would say that particular priest has been molesting children in our area. So what the Catholic Church would do, happened in Australia as well, is they would go, okay, instead of investigating that person, instead of calling the police, they would move that person to another church somewhere far away, and then that priest would go on to molest other children in other areas. So this was a global, this wasn't just an American thing, it was a global story that got picked up by journalists in Australia, Europe, and UK. Now, here's the thing. I can't imagine the New York Times or any mainstream newspaper being able to do that again, because they wouldn't have the money. It apparently cost them a lot of money. And here's the thing. At the end of it, if they couldn't come up with enough proof, they would have had to can the story. So this is the incredible bit. They could have investigated for 2 years, and had it not got to the bit where they thought they could have done it, they would have gone, we can't do it. And that means that for 2 years, they were paying multiple journalists, multiple researchers, right, to do a story, which would have been really expensive, with no guarantee at the end that story would be told, right? Because if you say something like that and you're a news organization and you get it wrong, you will get sued to the end. You will be sued so bad. It'll probably ruin. So that's the thing that I feel. I look at that and I can't think of another story that was that big, right? And I can't see it. I can't see the New York Times putting that much resources into a story for years and years without a guarantee knowing it's gonna go anywhere, because they wouldn't have the money. They wouldn't have the money to do it. I don't think they'd have the money, and I don't think they have the resources. You look at the New York Times now, and by the way, I subscribe to the New York Times. I like the New York Times. I'm not one of these people who hate the mainstream media. I still think the mainstream media is very important, right? Because they're the people who have the sources and things like that. So I actually like mainstream media. I don't think mainstream media is perfect, but I think they're very important. And I think I think they're the antidote to Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson and Nick Shirley. We need something, we need something that is the opposite of the craziness of what we're seeing on the right. And even if it's not as popular as Candace Owens, we still need it there. We need it to be there. Yeah. But even with the New York Times, they've moved away a lot from straight journalism. Now, a lot of their stuff is as an Aussie, I like to show Christy Nome a few episodes of Raised by Australian Boris. Yeah, that's right. That's right, Kim. Yeah. Yeah. And I would say, like on the New York Times, the number one person that, there's a guy called, everyone knows, Ezra Klein. I like Ezra Klein. I think he's a very good journalist. He's an opinion guy. I love his podcast. He's very good. But he's an opinion person, right? And I would love to see more of the straight news New York Times. I would love to see more of the straight news of the Washington Post, even the Wall Street Journal, all these major publications. And it doesn't have to just be about Trump. It could be about things. I will say this. I think Joe Biden's decline last year was a legitimate story to talk about. It was a legitimate story to talk about. Now, you could say it in the sense of like Trump is, it's happening to Trump as well, but it was a legitimate story. So people like Ezra Klein deserve credit for talking out against it when other people on the left were like, oh, you can't say that and stuff like that. So I think it's important that both sides of politics are not immune to news stories or being criticized, because otherwise what happens is the audiences you'll end up in an echo chamber, because the people who read your publications, if they only see one side being criticized, they're going to go, well, that side's not for me, right? But if they see a news organization criticizing both sides, then they're going to take that news organization more seriously, right? Um, and that's the thing. So it's important that news organizations continue to criticize both sides, because just because Trump is an authoritarian, just because Trump does incredibly bad things, doesn't mean that everyone in the Democrats is somehow pure as a driven snow. That's just not true. It can't be true. And you will get more credibility from independents and swing voters if you are seen criticizing the other side. You will get more credibility. So then when they do criticize Trump, they will go, actually, that guy's pretty fair. That guy's pretty fair. He doesn't just go after my side. He goes after his own side as well, and he will get more credibility. And therefore he will be, because the problem is, I don't hate Rachel Maddow. I like Rachel Maddow, but she's not changing any minds on the other side. She's not going to change one person's mind. However, I think there are people who are more sort of middle of the road who probably would change people's minds on the other side. Like and Melissa, like as you know, like I think people like Joe Walsh is one of those people who was a Republican, and is very critical of Trump, but he still holds a lot of ideas from being a libertarian and all that sort of stuff. So people on his side of politics, even though he criticized Trump at the same time, he still shows, so what I guess what I'm saying is that it's okay to criticize your own side. And I think when you do that from time to time, you get more credibility from all sides of politics. I myself, I mean, I don't have a big audience like other people do, but I criticize, I myself last year was criticizing people for not criticizing, for people criticizing Biden for his mental decline. I just think I thought it was a legitimate story to talk about. I just think you can't pretend like that's not happening. And then the other thing is that if you think that Trump is an existential crisis like I do, then why wouldn't you want the best communicator to go up against him? So I never saw. So the way I looked at Joe Biden is, I thought thank God for Jimmy Kimmel. Yeah. So the thing about it is, for when I looked at like Joe Biden, I think Joe Biden was a really nice person. He's a really nice person. He's a great person. But you can't just say, I want someone to go up against Trump who lies all the time because he's a nice person. You want Trump to this is politics. You want Trump to get beaten. You don't want to just leave someone you like on a personal level because you don't want to hurt their feelings when the alternative is that Trump is going to demolish, So I think we need to go back to being able to criticize all sides to bring back the divide on that. Now, obviously, what makes that very difficult is that you're up against someone like Trump. Now, if you're up against someone like Mitt Romney, or you're up against someone like, John McCain, they were more reasonable Republicans, right? You could disagree with them on stuff, but they were reasonable. It was very easy to be like, yeah, I don't disagree with you on that, but John McCain's like a nice person. I remember that time when Trump was, sorry, not Trump, Barack Obama was up against John McCain, and John McCain was holding a rally, and this woman out of the crowd says, "Oh, he's a Muslim, he hates America," all this sort of stuff. And then John McCain gets down and he says, "No, no, me and Barack Obama disagree on many things, but he's a patriot. He's a great American." I can't remember everything he said, but could you imagine Trump ever saying anything like that? Like, it would just be like, you know what I mean? And so it's much easier to be, well, we need to sort of be the same with that, because Trump is not John McCain. Trump is not Mitt Romney. And I think that's the key piece of all this. Dismissing is a constructive, intelligent, thoughtful debate. Yeah, it's a big part of it. Yeah, but you have to be rules. Everyone has to. Yeah, exactly. And Tamara, I want to give you an example. Of something, right? Now, let's say if we found out, I think this is a good test to find out whether you're just biased to the nth degree. If someone said to you tomorrow, right? And they had no evidence at all. They had no evidence at all. Someone said to you tomorrow, just a random person on Twitter, not a journalist, no one. They said, I have evidence that Donald Trump was raping 3-year-old girls 10 times a night, right? I think there would be some people on the left would go, yeah, that sounds about right. I think that's not true. I would think that is not true. He's not doing that, right? Now, if you just go along with that because you think it's Donald Trump, that's an issue. I'll say, well, that's an issue because then what happens is you got to be, why you criticize Trump, you have to keep some truth to it. It has to be based on reality because what the other side is very good at, the other side is very good at ignoring, let's just say this. If I say Trump did A, B, C, D, E, and they're all true, right? And then the next thing I say is there's no evidence that Trump did that, right? There's no evidence that Trump did that. And what happens is, and I'm not saying me, I'm saying someone who's got a big audience, right? Let's just say a left-wing person with a big audience says 10 things about Trump that are all correct, and then one thing that's not true, or we don't have any proof of. What will happen is JD Vance, Donald Trump, and all of MAGA media will take that one thing that person said that wasn't true, and they'll go, if you believe this person just lies, if you believe you cannot believe anything this person says because this person just said this thing about Trump, and we all know that's not true. I want to give you another example. When a couple of months ago, Trump disappeared. Remember, he disappeared for I don't know, was it like a week? It was like a week or something. Trump disappeared for about a week. And a lot of online people were saying that Trump was on his deathbed. He was about to die, right? He was suffering from something, right? We hadn't heard from him 3-4 days. Now, I kept an eye on mainstream media, and nobody at the New York Times, nobody at the Washington Post, nobody at any proper news organization was backing up this story that Trump was on his deathbed or something was. No, none of them were. None of them were. They were just reporting that Trump, that online people were making this story, right? So then Trump comes back. Now, obviously, I'm not saying Trump isn't in great health, but he's not on his deathbed, right? So Trump comes back and he does a news conference and he just seems like normal Trump, right? Not healthy, but just normal Trump, right? Hi, the Lucid Hex. I'll invite you in if you want to. Um, and so he invites it. So basically that happens. Now, JD Vance then tweets this out. He posts this out. He says, if you believe, maybe you should think twice about believing the same people who told you that Trump was on his deathbed. So he used that story to say you can't trust the media. Now, where he lied, and this is where they lie all the time, is that no mainstream media ever ran with that story. Not one. Not one. They were talking about random people on the internet and some online influencers. That was it. So, but they will use that. And I think this is the type of gaslighting that we're currently seeing. This is the type of gaslighting that we're currently seeing, right, at the moment from the Trump administration, is where they will basically lie. They'll take some truths. They will highlight the bits of where someone on the left, they will repost. They will repost I've seen JD Vance repost a random person on the internet. And I'm like, you're reposting a random person on the internet who said something crazy, but they're not reposting the New York Times. They're not reposting the Washington Post. They're not reposting Chuck Schumer, right? They're not reposting Joe Biden. They're reposting random people on the internet. Now, for us, we don't have examples. We don't have examples of random people on the internet on the right. All the crazy stuff is coming from the Trump administration. The people saying the crazy stuff is, hello, the trajectory. Good to see you, the trajectory. Thanks for joining. Thank you for joining. G'day. Um, yeah. So we don't on their side. We don't have random people on the internet. We have their president of the United States who says the most crazy things on the planet, conspiracy theories like that. So this is the thing between the left and the right. The left will have, of course, any party when you have millions of people will have some crazy people, but the crazy people on the left are random people. Not the Democratic Party, just random people on the internet. The crazy on the right is not just people on the internet, it's Trump, it's Kristi Noem, it's RFK Jr., it's people in power who make decisions. So on one hand, you have random people on the internet. On the other hand, you have the Trump administration. And that's the biggest difference to me between the two parties. Indiscriminate lies constantly, yeah, exactly right. Exactly right. Yeah. Ashley, did you want me to from the Lucid Hex? Did you want me to invite you in? Because I was going to. So just so you know, I was going to invite Ashley from the Lucid Hex. She's a fellow Aussie content creator. And she also talks about American politics. So I was going to invite you in today. Did you want me to invite you in? I think I still can, but I just yeah. Did you want me to invite? Just let me know, Lucy, if you want me to. I mean, Ashley, if you want me to invite you in. Yeah, just poke. Just say yes on the chat. I'll come in. Otherwise, I'll just keep going. Yeah. Join the free. The left needs to get things right. Join the free. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. It's all by design. By design. Exactly. Exactly right. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah. So I guess I guess what I'm saying is I'd love to see I'd love to see. It's hard to I guess the only positive thing. Hi, Ashley, and welcome. Yeah, 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 yeah. Ashley, just if Ashley, if you already posted something to me, I haven't seen it. Just post it again to me, and I'll invite you in, and you can other people can listen to two Aussies talk about American politics. If you found it annoying listening to one Aussie talk about American politics, imagine two Australians talking about American politics. That must drive everybody crazy. Yeah, 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 yeah. You know, yeah. So we often get that would be awesome. Yeah, yeah. We often in Australia, as everyone knows, we often get mind your own business. What this has nothing to do with you. Let me just say this actually. Now that before, if I'll see if Ashley wants to be invited in, is that about a week ago or a couple of weeks ago, are you in Australia? Yes, I am. The trajectory. I'm actually in Brisbane, Australia. I'm an Aussie. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm an Aussie who talks about American politics. I know it's crazy. This is probably a good time. Would it be because it's different perspective? Yeah, I think so. I think it's time to have a little Nibbles. That's my dog Nibbles. As you can see, she's still sleeping in the same position. She seems okay. And so I'll move there. Yeah, there you go. Sometimes, yeah, yeah. Would it be because it's different perspective? Yeah. Those of us here probably appreciate hearing the views from outside the country. Yeah, exactly. And look, yay nibs, yeah, exactly. And I think, I kind of get, to be honest with you, if I was talking about, hello, mate, yeah, how you going, mate? Joe, you're one of my favorites to listen to and read. I think it's important to have it outside. Thank you. Thanks for that. Because it's the US, what happens here affects exactly Melissa. Exactly. And what Melissa said is is 100%. Um, it is 100. Yeah, it's everything that America does. Good on you, mate. Yeah, good on you, mate. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Strife. Yeah, yeah. Strife. What else can I say? Crikey, crikey. Actually, I'll quickly say this. Over the Christmas holidays, I went to Australia Zoo, and Australia Zoo is the zoo that was owned by Steve Irwin and is now owned by their family. And they have a couple of white rhinos there, beautiful white rhinos, because they're obviously going extinct. And it was so beautiful to see these white rhinos. And I was going to wear my Australia Zoo white rhino shirt, but I forgot to. Kimmy Nibs will do a better job as press. Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, but anyway, I will say that I think it would be with Steve Irwin missed exactly. Yeah. Put another shrimp on the Barbie. Yeah, put another shrimp on the Sharby. Yeah, I was just typing that. Yeah. We love Aussies. Oh, thanks, mate. Really appreciate that, buddy. Or woman, I'm not sure. I hope I don't misgender you. And but but the thing is, I think one of the reasons why Australians, like Melissa said, we talk so much about American politics is because, as Melissa said, it affects everybody. It affects all countries, right? Everything America does affects the rest of the world. Now, I would say this, and Steve Irwin and family, that's right. Steve Irwin's family now owns Australia Zoo. Australia Zoo is about an hour and a half drive from where I lived. So if you ever come to Australia, I really recommend you go to Australia Zoo. It's about an hour north of Brisbane, Australia. It's one of the best zoos. And one of the reasons it's a great zoo is because it's such a big zoo. We have other zoos, but they're in the cities, so they're small. This particular zoo is like in a rural area. So it reminds me of walking, like it reminds me of Jurassic Park. If you've ever seen the movie Jurassic Park, where you're like you see people walking around and suddenly you suddenly see a giraffe. It's such a big zoo. It's like they have a lot of space, they have a lot of room. It just feels like, I don't know, kinder to the animals. But anyway, yeah. So go to Australia Zoo. They also support a lot of animals, like wildlife animals around the world, like the white rhino, which I think is great. Yeah, yeah. So excellent. Yeah. But so what was I saying? I think I think that if I or other people in Australia, if I had other people in Australia, I haven't heard from Ashley yet. Ashley, do you want to join? Ashley, I hope Ashley's not being shy. Ashley, do you want me to? I'm not even sure if she's still here. Ashley, do you want me to bring you in to the conversation? They would love you. I think everyone would love to speak to another Aussie, Ashley. And by the look of it, yeah, Ashley, it's called the Lucid Hex. Anyone wants to know the Lucid Hex? She's great Substack account. She seems very funny. But yeah. So I think the reason why I think it would be weird if please say that there are those of us here in the US that are absolutely devastated. We are embarrassed and heartbroken what is happening to here. So good for your zoos, but we need help and support. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. And I think we do support. I think people realize is that when people like me or other people criticize Donald Trump and American politics, is that it's really important you understand that we're not criticizing all Americans. And I say this all the time. Only 30% of eligible voters in America voted for Trump, right? Olivia Newton-John, fantastic. Yeah, great singer, Greece. Yeah. I've got to say, Australia does pretty good considering we only have 27 million people. Yeah. Um, and, um, and so, you know, I think, we don't criticize the United States, all its people. And I think sometimes when I feel bad that some people might think that I think, or other Australians or people from overseas think we're talking about all Americans, because we're not. Because from my perspective, the people that I feel most sorry for is people in America who didn't vote for Donald Trump, because it's people in America who didn't vote for Donald Trump who are being affected by this the worst, because you live in the country. Now, it affects Australia, it affects Europe, it affects Venezuela, it's affecting Greenland and Denmark, and it affects a lot of countries that don't receive US aid anymore. So it does affect a lot of countries, tariffs, all that sort of stuff. But, if you're in America and you have to live in that place, like we Australian contributed greatly to the anti-fascist effort. Yeah, absolutely. And the thing is that we don't, we separate the people of the United States to the administration. And so don't ever think that we're talking about all Americans. This is freedom of speech and discourse. And if people don't like what you're saying, whether it affects you or not, they can tune in somewhere else. But I know as far as I'm concerned, I'm here because I need to connect with at least somebody in the rest of the world because they're not yeah, exactly right. And I would say this, Tamara, as well, is that if this was happening in my country, I would love to hear from people in America or Europe and overseas who were sympathetic to what is happening here. That would make me feel less lonely. It would make me feel that I had people from overseas, it would be, for me, it wouldn't be a negative, it would be a positive. It would only be a negative if the people criticizing what was happening in Australia put us all in the same boat, right? If they said all Australians are crazy, all Australians are like Donald Trump, all Australians are like this, then that is offensive. And I totally understand why people in America, right, we do not vote in. Yeah, yeah, exactly right. I would understand why people in America would get upset about people overseas trying to put everyone in the same boat, right? When that's not true, right? Now I have heard people in Australia and I have heard people overseas put all Americans in the same boat, and I disagree with that strongly. Strongly disagree with that. Yeah, and I'm saying that as someone who does an amazing American accent. I wish that was true. My daughter was in Denmark for her master's in nursing, and her clinicians are there. And she said the last 2 weeks it was hate, even though she's been there for 3 months. Really? Okay, that was on MAGA. Yeah. So I will say that. Look, I will say there will definitely be people in Europe, in people. Look, Denmark. I will say Denmark probably feels a little bit stronger about America because they've been threatened by the United States. And if you're being threatened by the United States, you probably have a less clear view of what's going on, right? So I would give Denmark a little bit of a pass because they are being threatened by the United States directly for Greenland. So I will give them. So I'm not saying what's happening to your daughter there or who it was is a good thing. I think it's a bad thing for anybody to paint a whole country like that. But for Denmark, it's a little bit more excusable. But for a country, the rest of the world or Australia, the idea that we would criticise everyone in the United States. Also, I think what it comes down to as well is a lot of people in Europe or Australia, they don't understand American politics like the way I do because my son was in the UK and they welcomed him because he and his friends hate Trump. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I think it is a different experience for different people. I don't think it's across the board. I know people, honestly, I don't blame people for being furious with us. Yeah, yeah. And look, Melissa, like there are people I know of people in America and Australia who are American, and they will often start a conversation with, if you meet them for the first time, they'll often joke with, "Don't blame me. I didn't vote for the orange man." They will make a joke. She didn't blame them, and was with them and didn't want to come home. She didn't blame them. Oh, okay, yeah, yeah. And look, Amy, I don't think she should have been treated that way. I think it's wrong. I think it's wrong for people to treat people like that. I don't think that's right. Because, but I think what a lot of people, part of me though, says we can't really blame them for being mad at us because our representatives, yeah, I think a lot. So as someone who lives in a country like Australia, where I have met quite a lot of Americans, I totally get that. Amy, my cousin's in Europe and doesn't want to return either. Yeah, I I get I get why people in countries like Australia and overseas will sometimes blame the whole country or everyone. But a lot of it, some of it is based on they don't understand how the American system works, right? They just assume because in Australia, if you get voted in, you will generally get you will generally get the most votes. Like in Australia, we have compulsory voting, right? So almost over 90% of people who can vote, right? So it's a very high percentage of voting. So when someone gets in Australia, they blame anything that happens, they blame the country because it's the country that voted that person in. What a lot of people in Australia, they might listen to American politics, but they don't. I don't know one Australian who understands American politics like I do in terms of the electoral college. They would know what the electoral college system is. Most Australians would have no idea what the electoral college is, right? They would have no idea that someone could win the popular vote and still lose the election. So a lot of the blame is based on thinking that the majority of the people in that country voted for Trump, right? Or that there was tens of millions of people who didn't vote at all. So that is not something that happens in Australia. So it's coming from a place of ignorance, of not understanding the system. So when I say to them, well, only 30% of eligible voters voted for Trump, it takes me like a full hour to get them to understand how it works. So, it's always going to be like, there's the end of the electoral college. Yeah. So a lot of the problem is just they don't understand how it works. They just assume that most Americans voted for Trump. They assume that most people support Trump. And that's why they blame most Americans for it. And this isn't most people, but it's a few people who will say, but it's definitely not like, I've never heard of a story in Australia where someone has been abused or someone has been like hated on. I've never heard any of that happening in Australia. Um, generally speaking, if someone thinks like that in Australia, they would keep it to themselves. They wouldn't say anything, right? It would be like, they would outwardly be like, "Oh, how are you going? Oh, great. How are you?" They wouldn't express it to that person, right? We're not that sort of country, so it's hard to know what people think. But all the people I know in America who live in Australia haven't had bad experiences in that way. So yeah, ignorance. Yeah, yeah. Look, there is ignorance in Australia, and I think in Europe about how the American system works, and that's going to happen anywhere. Um, because a lot of people in Australia, they follow American politics, but they're not following the ins and outs of your system at all. Not at all. Yeah, yeah, not at all. Yeah. So yeah, so I think that's the part of it that I think is a big issue. I think people um people like me, it would be strange. I will say this trajectory, the Electoral College is a good thing. I just posted my first article, the midterm elections. The Electoral College will be my next one. Ah, right. Okay. You think the Electoral College is a good thing? Okay. Yep. I mean, I've never thought the Electoral College was a good thing. Um, how do Aussies treat Yanks? I think they treat him good. Yeah, I think they do. I don't know. I know Americans and none of them, they've been here for a while. The Americans I know in Australia are people who traveled to Australia and then ended up falling in love with either an Aussie man or an Aussie woman, and that's how they ended up back in this country. Yeah, yeah. Because we have, in terms of quality of people to date, we have the best in the world. So no, I'm not saying that, but we're just saying like they're the people that I know. The people I know are all the people I know who are American are now in a relationship or married to people from that's why they're here. So they have Australian partners. Um, can you give us a hint about why you think it's a good thing, Amy? Yeah, yeah. Can I just say this about the Electoral College, right? I don't know. A couple of months ago, and a couple of people here would have seen it. Is that I interviewed two people. One of them is a Democratic strategist. I think her name is Alyssa Cass. Um, and the other person I interviewed at the same time was a Republican strategist, and they're part of oh my God, I'm going to get this wrong, but they're part of an organization. We need to have, an organization called the National, Kimmy, you're going to have to help me here. Interstate Compact, no, this is it. The National Popular Vote Interstate Compact. Okay. So what they're doing is they're getting, these people have been, so one's a Republican, one's a Democrat. I interviewed them on my Substack Live a couple of months ago. Someone reached out to me and then I interviewed them. Unfortunately, the audio was really bad, so that was an issue, but I still interviewed them. And what they're trying, and they've been interviewed on the Daily Show, that sort of thing. And what they're trying to do is they actually not trying to get rid of the popular vote, uh, because it's basically designed to keep the major population densities from ruling everyone. So the little guy gets a voice. National popular vote. That's it, Kimmy. That's national popular. Yes, Joe, you got it. Yeah. So um, the reason they're against the reason why they're against the popular vote, and remember, one is a Democrat, one's a Republican, and is because they don't actually agree that the electoral college system um, keeps just rural areas from, because I think the whole idea behind it was that, well, if it's all going to become about California and it's all going to become about New York, and the politicians are not going to care about the small states, right? And so they're going to get ignored. Now, I will say that their argument against this is a pretty strong argument. I mean, I could be, and I think their argument is that's already happening, right? Because at the moment, um, California and New York are being ignored. And they're the most populous states in the country because everyone knows they're going to go Democrats. So they've gone. So why would you want some of the most populous states ignored and have the smaller states only be the ones with the smallest populations be the ones that make the decider? That to me doesn't make any sense, right? Because you're ignoring the majority of the population for the smaller population. The other thing is that at the moment with the electoral college, it almost all comes down to Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan, right? Those three states, right? So what's happening is that all the other states are being ignored. As a Pennsylvania, I feel like everyone comes to my swing state because of the electoral colleges. That's not fair. Exactly, Melissa. Exactly. The amount of money that was spent in Pennsylvania and the amount of time that was spent in Pennsylvania was completely crazy at the last election, right? So why does Pennsylvania get so much attention, but California and New York, which have way bigger populations, get almost no attention? To me, the reason for the electoral vote has now turned the other way around, where small states with small populations are being ignored, are getting much more power where the majority of the population is not. And three states are now getting all the power, which is Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan. So, and they don't represent the whole of America. So what's happening is, in my opinion, and the opinion of these other people that I spoke to at the National Poll, is that the reason for bringing in the electoral college is that might have been a reason hundreds of years ago, right, or whenever it was brought in, but the population has changed a lot. Thanks, Kimmy. Thanks for coming. The populations have changed a lot. Not all officers, still district and both. Yeah. So again, I don't think the electoral college is doing what it was meant to do with that system when everyone's just fixated on 3 or 4 different states and all the other states are being ignored, including, by the way, um, uh, not only that, but a lot of the small red states are also being included are being dismissed as well. Um, and and that what happens then is you have um, the Democratic Party and you have the Republican Party all trying to make the people in Pennsylvania happy, which is great for Melissa, and all the people in Wisconsin happy, and all the people in Michigan happy, but they don't represent the whole country, right? So So basically, why I don't understand why that's a good system, and why not have a system where politicians want to make sure that people in California are happy, people in Pennsylvania are happy. Now, remember this: if you get rid of the electoral college, the people in Pennsylvania still get to vote. Tamara, I apologize for my ignorance, but I had always thought the electoral college was a representative vote of the state, but only under certain circumstances could they overrule the popular vote. Yeah. So I'll go back to what the National Compact electoral college vote works. Right. These people, the strategists from the National Compact, Interstate Compact, is they're not actually trying to get rid of the electoral college. What they're saying is they're going to say to people, for example, in Pennsylvania, they will say to people, they will get the people in Pennsylvania to sign up before the election and get the electors to all agree that the electoral college votes will go to whoever wins the popular vote, right? So if, for example, if Pennsylvania signs up and at the next election, whoever wins the popular vote, they will give those electoral votes to the popular vote winner, not to who just won the state. Right now, what's important to say about this is this doesn't go into effect until they get enough states signed up that they get to the 270 electoral college votes. So even if they did get Pennsylvania signed up to it, if the other states didn't sign up to it enough to get to 270, it doesn't get triggered, right? So they have to have enough states to say yes before it triggers. So it's basically not getting rid of the electoral college. It's saying that that if your state agrees to this compact, that your state will give the elector votes, the electoral votes, to whoever wins the popular vote. I vote for popular vote to give everybody a vote. That really counts. Yeah, exactly. Tamara, when I was a kid, we taught that. Yeah, I missed that one. Levy, the district of the electoral system in part why people don't vote, stating my vote. Yeah, exactly, Levy. That's exactly right. How many people in America are not voting because they live in a state that is either a red state or a blue state? There would be millions of those people, right? If you're in California, a lot of people wouldn't feel inspired to vote. Now, this is what the people that I interviewed, I asked this question. I asked, isn't this a democratic thing? Why would Republicans, right? Why would Republicans want to sign up to a popular vote type situation? And he came back to me, this is a Republican, and he said, well, the reason is he said, as a Republican, once we make it a popular vote thing, that will bring into play a whole bunch of people who are not voting right now because they think their vote doesn't make any difference, right? So a lot of those people would now start to vote, right? So we're talking about that could be a Trump supporter in California, or not even a Trump supporter, a Republican in California. That could be a Republican in New York City who doesn't vote because they think it's just going to go Democrat anyway. So the Republicans can make an argument that we can pick up a lot of Republican people because remember, California, New York, even though they vote Democrats, they have millions of people who vote for Republicans there. So they can pick up a lot of votes in swing state, in non-swing states. So again, what this particular compact thing could do for popular vote is at the moment, political parties are not they're not trying to get the votes of people in California or people in New York or all these other states, right? All these other states, right? So they're not vying for their votes. So when they do TV ads, they're doing TV ads for Pennsylvania, Wisconsin. They're not doing TV ads for a Republican living in California or a Republican living in New York. Now, if they bring the popular vote in, the Republicans can now start advertising or targeting other Republicans who are not in those states. So, and that's the same for Democrats. Democrats can now start targeting Democrats in Florida or Texas or other states and say to them, look, your vote didn't count before, but now that it's a popular vote, your vote now counts. Everyone's votes count in the popular vote, but in the electoral college vote, only a few people's vote counts. So that's what I think. So I think a lot of those people who don't vote are not voting because they think their vote doesn't count. So I think what you will see is that you'll see millions of more Americans vote. And I think the Republicans can make an argument that, and not only that, the both sides of, but yeah, I think not only that, I think both sides of politics will now be, right? The both sides of politics will now be trying to get votes from all Americans, not just some Americans in 3 or 4 different states. I think that's more democratic, right? I think that's a lot more democratic. In my country, Australia, the idea, like you do have you do have swing districts that do get generally more money because they're in swing districts. However, they're not necessarily what's going to be the winning thing. You generally have to get many, many more states to sign up to this sort of thing, right? So yeah, so I think, in my opinion, I don't think the electoral vote thing is a good thing for either side of party. So would a popular vote protect or hinder our current system? The states are in charge of electoral college. Would it be easier to nationalise the vote if we did away with the electoral college? Yeah, I'm not sure about that. Yeah, Rob, these parties um, would each be forced to appeal to voters they will, which Republicans have completely. Yeah, exactly. Exactly, Rob. You would now have not just the Republican Party, but you would now have the Democrats trying to appeal to voters in states that they never had to appeal to before. I feel like it would make a difference in my small red state, even when I regularly vote. Democratic, I think, why bother? Exactly, T. And look, T, how many people in your state who are Democrats might just say, you know what, why bother voting? My vote doesn't count. But T, if it was a popular vote, your vote would count as much as someone in Pennsylvania's would count. Yeah. So yeah, I agree, T. This is why I think the popular vote thing is good. It makes both political parties campaign all around the country, not just in 1 or 2 states, and it makes and it makes every American feel like their vote counts, right? Exactly, Joe. It would revolutionise U.S. politics. Yeah, exactly. Like, you know, um, Amy. But the flip side of that is we would get candidates that are for things like New York City or LA. Yeah, I don't know about that. I don't know about that because because if you put or because there's a lot more Republican voters and a lot more Californian Republicans in California than people realize. There are millions and millions of people who vote Republican in New York City or in California. And think about this, Amy. How many of those are not voting because they think, I live in California. Why would I vote for a Republican here? My vote doesn't count. So you're going to bring out a lot more Republicans in Democratic states, right? And also, you would have a candidate probably who is, you would still need, and by the way, you can't just win with California and New York. You would still have to appeal to other states. The apathy thing that you're expressing is more about party affiliation. Can't go do away. Yeah. Aren't all the votes counted anyway? Isn't there comparison made? And I live in a state less than 1 million people, so I've always voted since. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly, Joe. There are tons of Republicans in both. I know a lot of them. Yeah, exactly. There are a lot of people. People don't realize how many Republicans live in California and New York. There's actually a lot of them, a lot more than people realize. I mean, they voted for Arnold Schwarzenegger. You know, they voted for. So they voted for Arnold Schwarzenegger, who's a Republican. Now, I think what would happen is that you would end up with more centre left and centre right candidates, and you would have probably less far left and far right candidates. That's what I think would happen because you would have to appeal across the board. You would have to appeal to people in California, but you'd also have to appeal to people in other states because you need enough electoral college votes. California and New York is not going to get you there. You're still going to have to appeal to Pennsylvania and other states as well, but just not as much as you do right now. Um, so yeah, that's my opinion on that as well. Even some of my liberal friends in California voted for Arnold, exactly. But there are many more Dems. There are many more Dems, but I just think I think oh gosh, I can't. I just think I just think that I just think that there is a good argument for both Republicans and Democrats to get rid of it. There is more unenrolled party trends. Yeah. Yeah, and that's the other thing, Levy. Like, how many people don't even enroll because they live in California or New York or some red state, and you're part of the other one. Only the rich vote. Yeah. So again, I think that's the case. Anyway, thank you guys. I do have to go. I had so much fun coming here today. I was going to talk about some other stuff. I was going to invite in Ashley, but she sort of came and went. Maybe she's having some technical issues. Maybe I'll talk to her another day. Um, talk to another Aussie. But thank you so much, guys. It's been really fun. And look, by the way, if there's anyone out there listening and they want to come onto my live one day and have a conversation, including Melissa or anyone else or Jimmy or anything like that, let me know and we can have a conversation. We can interact with the chat as well. I'd love to talk to anybody. Yeah. So thank you very much. Thank you, Melissa. Thanks, Kimmy. Thank you, everyone. I'm just going to let you say goodbye to Nibbles. Thank you, Tamara. I don't know. My computer's frozen. Yeah. So there's Nibbles there. Joe, thanks. Thanks, Car. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Melissa. Thank you, guys. There's Nibbles. I'm gonna go with just Nibbles, Nibbles, Nibbles. Say goodbye. Saying goodbye. Nibbles saying goodbye. See Marnie. Eh, that's her goodbye. I'll subscribe. Thank you, Territory. Thank you so much. Yeah. If you haven't subscribed, smash that like button. No, I'm not going to do that. That's cringe. All right. See you guys.